Imagine sitting in a dark tower at 2 a.m., with hundreds of lives depending on every word you say. One mistake, and the sky itself becomes a nightmare. The night shift always carried a different kind of silence. Not the peaceful sort, but the heavy, pressing quiet that seemed to cling to the walls of the control tower. Outside, the airfield stretched like an ocean of lights, runway beacons blinking in precise rhythm, guiding invisible giants through the darkness. Above, the sky was a vast, restless canvas where lives moved at 500 knots, trusting unseen voices on the ground to keep them safe. James Cole adjusted his headset, the familiar crackle of radio chatter buzzing in his ears. 15 years in the job had taught him that quiet moments could turn into chaos without warning. He glanced at the radar screen in front of him, green lines sweeping in steady arcs, each dot a plane filled with passengers who would never know his name. That anonymity didn't matter. What mattered was keeping them alive. Next to him sat Mia Alvarez, a trainee barely 6 months into her certification program. Her eyes were locked on her monitor, wide with concentration. James remembered that look. He'd worn it once himself, back when the weight of the skies hadn't yet carved its mark into his face. "Steady pace," he said softly, noticing the tension in her shoulders. "The sky doesn't care how fast you think. It cares how precise you are." She nodded, scribbling down a call sign as a pilot requested a course adjustment. Outside the tower windows, storm clouds loomed far on the horizon, a dark bruise spreading across the night sky. James's gut tightened. He'd seen weather like that before. It never stayed at the horizon for long. A routine shift, the logs had said. Moderate traffic, scattered storms in the forecast, nothing unusual. But air traffic control had a way of turning routine into nightmare in the span of a heartbeat. One misunderstood instruction, one technical glitch, one plane drifting half a mile off course, that was all it took for hundreds of lives to hang by a thread. James rubbed his temples. The hum of equipment, the smell of burnt coffee, the endless voices calling out from above, this was his battlefield. Unlike soldiers, he fought with numbers, coordinates, and timing. His enemies were fatigue, confusion, and the ever-ticking clock. As the minutes ticked past midnight, more planes checked in. Cargo flights, red-eye passengers, a medevac jet cutting across from the north. The radar began to crowd, dots stacking on dots. James leaned forward, his instincts prickling. Then came the first warning, a faint beep, a shift on the screen. One aircraft dipping too close to another's flight path. James's hand shot to his mic. And just like that, the night's silence was broken. The tower at night was both sanctuary and prison. James sat before his glowing radar screen, the gentle hum of electronics filling the silence between transmissions. Outside, the airport's runways stretched like silver veins beneath the scattered lights, slick with drizzle from a brewing storm. The horizon was a dark canvas, clouds swelling heavier by the minute. So far, the night had been quiet. Cargo jets lumbered eastward, a commuter flight dipped low and out of his scope. James sipped his stale coffee, the taste bitter on his tongue. Nights like this were supposed to be manageable, quiet skies, predictable routes, routine checks. But in air traffic control, calm often meant a storm was crouching just beyond the horizon, waiting to pounce. It began with a single voice, calm but tense. "Tower, this is Delta 472. Requesting heading change, weather's building ahead." James adjusted his headset, eyes narrowing at the scope. A mass of turbulence was forming just north of the sector. "Delta 472, roger. Turn right heading 320. Maintain flight level 310. The pilot confirmed, his tone clipped. James leaned closer to his screen. The storm cell wasn't small, it was growing fast, spreading like an ink blot across the map. And worse, 2 more flights were headed straight into it. Before he could issue warnings, another transmission crackled. Control, United 365. We're losing visibility. Instruments showing erratic readings. James' pulse quickened. United 365, maintain current altitude. I'll vector you clear. The calm hum of the tower was gone now, replaced by static-filled voices and warning chimes from his console. Within minutes, what had been empty skies filled with blips converging toward the same patch of storm-choked airspace. The storm hadn't just arrived, it had swallowed the sector whole. He spoke quickly, moving planes like chess pieces on a board. Air France 244, climb and maintain 340. American 792, descend 280 immediately. Two green dots adjusted, passing each other by the slimmest margin. James' shoulders tensed, but he didn't breathe. There was no time. Another alarm shrieked across his console. Collision alert. His heart skipped. Two more flights, drawn into the storm's orbit, barreling toward each other. Lufthansa 321, turn left heading 080. Climb to 360, now. Singapore 901, immediate right turn heading 150. Maintain 290. Seconds ticked. The blips quivered on his screen. Then, separation. Just enough. The alert went silent, leaving James with the echo of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. For a fleeting moment, the tower was quiet again. But outside, the storm raged louder, sheets of rain slamming against the glass. Lightning forked across the horizon, briefly illuminating the trembling outlines of planes above the clouds. James could almost feel the terror of passengers strapped into seats, buffeted by turbulence they couldn't see or control. He forced his mind back to the task. He couldn't think of passengers, not yet. They were dots, coordinates, vectors. The second he let the human weight sink in, he'd falter. And faltering wasn't an option. A new transmission cut through his focus. Tower, this is Flight 908. We've lost an engine. Repeat, engine 2 is down. Severe turbulence. Requesting priority vectors for immediate landing. James froze, the words slicing through him like a blade. He scanned quickly. Flight 908 was smack in the middle of the storm, altitude unstable, drifting into paths of other aircraft he'd only just separated. Flight 908, roger. Turn right heading 065. Descend to flight level 260. You are cleared direct to runway 27. Emergency crews will be on standby. His voice was calm, but inside, panic thrashed. To bring Flight 908 down safely, he would need to clear a corridor, a path through chaos. And right now, the skies above him were anything but clear. He tapped his mic again, rapid fire. Delta 472, hold altitude. Expect delay. United 365, descend to 270, vectoring you east. Lufthansa 321, maintain heading and prepare for further instructions. Every reroute shifted pressure onto another flight, like squeezing one end of a balloon only to watch it bulge somewhere else. James' fingers gripped the edge of the console. He needed perfection, one mistake, one hesitation, and the storm would claim lives. Another crack of thunder rattled the tower. He glanced through the rain-streaked glass, searching for lights in the sky, but saw nothing. Only darkness, flashing white with each bolt of lightning. The world outside was chaos, the world inside the radar was his only tether. Control, Flight 908 came again, voice sharp, ragged. We've got smoke in the cabin. Passengers are panicking. We need immediate landing clearance. James shut his eyes for half a second. Smoke. He pictured families clutching each other, oxygen masks dangling, chaos unfolding behind sealed cockpit doors. He forced the image away, fingers trembling as he keyed the mic. Flight 908, runway 27 is clear. You are priority 1. Continue descent. Emergency crews are awaiting. The blip representing Flight 908 crawled closer to the runway vector, fighting turbulence every mile. Around it, other blips wove dangerously, each one a threat to its survival. James continued to carve and bend the sky, shaping narrow corridors where none existed. He heard snippets of voices, muffled sobs through an open cockpit mic, the kind of sound that made the air in the tower feel heavier, thicker. He swallowed hard. If he thought about them as people, children, mothers, fathers, he would shatter. So he didn't. He thought of headings, altitudes, separation. He thought of the blips. He thought only of survival. The alarms on his console wailed again. 2 new aircraft, rerouted by his last maneuvers, were now converging. He didn't hesitate. His voice was steel. American 792, immediate descent 240. Air France 244, climb 380 now. The planes adjusted. Separation restored. But it was only a matter of time before the storm forced another conflict. And in the center of it all was Flight 908, limping toward the runway, a wounded bird clawing through the tempest. James' chest tightened. This was no longer just another night shift. It was survival, for them, and for him. The storm refused to let go. Sheets of rain lashed against the tower windows, and James could feel the vibration of thunder rumbling through the steel bones of the building. His headset buzzed with overlapping voices, each demanding his attention. But his eyes never left the struggling blip of Flight 908. It crept along the vector line toward runway 27, altitude unstable, speed fluctuating like a faltering heartbeat. Tower, this is Flight 908. Cabin smoke worsening. Flight attendants reporting fainting passengers. We're declaring Mayday. James' throat tightened. He had already cleared every possible corridor for them, but the sky was alive with chaos. Other aircraft circled in holding patterns, some dangerously close to storm cells, all waiting for his word. Every second he gave to Flight 908 stole time from the others. Flight 908, Roger. You are priority. Maintain descent. Continue heading 065. Runway lights are at maximum intensity. He keyed another channel immediately. Delta 472, extend holding pattern 10 miles west. Maintain 310. United 365, divert east immediately. Expect vectors to secondary airport. A pause. Then the pilot of United 365 broke through, frustration crackling in his voice. Control, United 365. We're low on fuel. We can't extend much longer. James froze. Fuel. The word clawed at him. A holding pattern meant minutes burned away, and minutes meant gallons of fuel vanishing into thin air. He stole a glance at their coordinates. They had perhaps 30 minutes of endurance, maybe less in this storm. I understand, United 365. Hold position for now. I'll reroute when able. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. James knew the crew understood what, when able, meant. It meant not now. Another voice cut in, sharper, more desperate. Lufthansa 321, turbulence severe. Instruments unreliable. Request immediate vector clear of storm. James' fingers flew across the console, but his scope was packed with aircraft, their paths tangled like threads in a knot. There was no clear corridor, no easy escape. The only open path was the one he was carving for Flight 908. Lufthansa 321, maintain heading 080. Stand by. The reply was clipped, strained. Standing by, but not long, control. James exhaled, his chest tight, eyes flicking back to Flight 908. The blip was wavering, dipping lower than it should. He adjusted his mic, forcing steel into his voice. Flight 908, adjust heading 075. You are 3 miles from final approach. Wind shear reported at surface level. Caution on descent. The pilot's voice was steady but strained, like someone holding the weight of the world in his lungs. Copy, tower. 075. Final approach. The moment stretched. The runway lights, bright even through sheets of rain, were waiting. Fire trucks and ambulances lined the tarmac, their strobes faint pinpricks against the storm. And then, an alarm screamed. James jerked his head back to the console. American 792 was off course, pushed by the storm's violent winds, drifting toward the descent path of Flight 908. American 792, immediate climb to 320. Right turn heading 160. The reply was panicked. Negative, control. We're near fuel critical. Unable to climb, we need descent now. James' heart pounded. Flight 908 was locked on approach, smoke in the cabin, no time for delay. American 792 was sinking into their path, running out of fuel, begging for clearance. For a split second, he saw both blips converging, their paths tightening like a noose. His palms were slick with sweat. If he cleared 792 to descend, 908's approach was doomed. If he denied them, 792 could flame out midair. American 792, hold altitude. Hold altitude. You do not have descent clearance. His voice cracked with authority, leaving no room for argument. The reply was anguished, but firm. Tower, we'll try, but we're not sure how long. The blip quivered, then steadied, hovering just above Flight 908's corridor. James' pulse thudded against his ribs. One crisis averted, for now. Another crack of thunder. The tower shuddered. Tower, this is Flight 908. Gear down. We are on final. James swallowed hard, watching the blip creep closer. Cleared to land, runway 27. Winds 190 at 35, gusting 50. Emergency crews standing by. The cockpit mic carried faint background noise, alarms, coughing, chaos. Then silence. James held his breath as the blip descended lower, lower, crossing the threshold of the runway vector. 908, winds shifting, caution, he barked. The blip dipped, wavering dangerously. For one awful second, James thought they'd been torn from the sky. Then, stabilization. The blip steadied, skimming down the glide path. He leaned forward, whispering under his breath. Come on, you've got this. And then the radio crackled. Tower, this is Flight 908. Touchdown. James exhaled, his body sagging against the console. For a moment, relief washed over him like warm water. Cheers erupted faintly from emergency crews on the ground. The crippled aircraft was on the tarmac, alive. But the relief was short-lived. United 365's voice thundered back into his ears. Tower, this is United 365. Fuel at minimums. We cannot hold any longer. Request emergency landing clearance. James sat up, heart hammering anew. The nightmare wasn't over. One plane was safe, but the storm still held the others hostage. And the fuel clock was ticking. The celebration of Flight 908's landing lasted only a breath. The storm still howled, the console still glowed red with warnings, and the radios still burned with desperate voices. United 365's call echoed in James' ears, fuel at minimums. We cannot hold any longer. He straightened, adrenaline surging back into his veins. United 365, Roger. Prepare for emergency approach. Heading 075, descend to 3,000 feet. The reply was shaky, tinged with exhaustion. Copy, 075, descending. James scanned the scope. Other aircraft clustered dangerously near storm cells, their fuel dwindling, their pilots fraying. But United 365 was the most urgent, a heavy bird with nearly 200 souls aboard, running on fumes. If they didn't touch down soon, they'd fall from the sky. He punched another frequency. All traffic, clear approach corridor immediately. Priority landing, United 365. Protests erupted. Control, Lufthansa 321, turbulence worsening. We can't hold much longer. American 792, still fuel critical, request vectors again. Their voices crashed over him like waves, but James could not bend. Stand by, all aircraft. United 365 is emergency priority. Maintain your holds. His headset buzzed with angry static, but discipline held. They trusted him, or had no choice but to. James focused on United 365's blip. The storm tossed it like a toy, altitude fluctuating wildly. His gut clenched. Come on, stay together. Just a few more miles. United 365, you are 5 miles from final. Wind shear severe at surface level. Report when gear is down. Static hissed, then the captain's voice, gear deploying, standby, negative. Malfunction indicator. We're trying again. James froze. Gear failure. In this storm, on this fuel, there was no time for second attempts. A gear-up landing was a nightmare scenario, sparks, metal shredding, lives balanced on a knife edge. United 365, confirm, are you able to deploy gear? There was a pause, then the co-pilot's voice broke through, strained but resolute. Tower, gear locked. Green lights confirmed. James exhaled, though his pulse thundered on. Roger, cleared to land runway 27. Emergency crews are ready. The blip inched forward. 4 miles. 3. Another voice suddenly screamed into his headset. Tower. Lufthansa 321 declaring Mayday. Severe turbulence, losing altitude fast. James' blood ran cold. He flicked to their track, they were dropping into a descent path dangerously close to United 365. 2 planes. 2 emergencies. 1 sky. He made the call instantly, his voice cutting like a blade. Lufthansa 321, immediate left turn heading 045. Climb to 4,000 if able. Do not enter approach corridor. The reply was ragged, barely controlled. Trying, engine straining, climbing. James gripped the console, eyes darting between blips. Lufthansa wavered but edged away, narrowly clearing United 365's line. One crisis dodged, but only just. United 365, you're clear. 2 miles from final. Winds gusting 55 knots. Keep her steady. Silence. Then the captain's voice, calm but hollow. Control, we've got this. Just, keep the lights bright. James leaned forward, forehead nearly against the glass, as if willing the aircraft through sheer force of will. The runway stretched out below, a glowing beacon in the storm. The blip descended lower. 1 mile. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the consoles. For a heartbeat, James thought he'd lost them. The blip shuddered, altitude plummeting. 365, correct immediately. You're too low, he barked, every nerve alight. The captain's grunt carried through the headset, followed by the groan of straining engines. The blip leveled, wobbling, then steadied just above the glide slope. Seconds stretched like hours. James barely breathed. And then, contact. Tower, United 365, touchdown. A cheer erupted over the frequency, faint through the static. Emergency crews rushed toward the runway. The blip slowed, rolled, stopped. They were safe. James slumped back, chest heaving. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to close his eyes. One more disaster survived. But the radios refused to let him rest. American 792, still critical. Requesting immediate vectors. We cannot stay aloft. Lufthansa 321, turbulence still severe, fuel low. The nightmare pressed on. Dozens of lives still hung in the storm's grip, demanding his focus. James forced his eyes open. His voice, though hoarse, remained steady. All aircraft, maintain current holds. Stand by for sequencing. You are not forgotten. The storm raged outside, hammering the tower, but inside the glass box James sat unbroken, every nerve ablaze, every decision balanced between catastrophe and salvation. As he scanned the crowded scope, one truth seared itself into his bones: there would be no rest tonight. Not until every last blip found the ground. The storm did not relent quickly. For hours after United 365's miraculous landing, James guided one aircraft after another through the chaos. Each vector, each command, was a thread holding human lives above the abyss. One by one, they touched down. Lufthansa 321, battered but intact. American 792, fuel gauges blinking on empty. Cargo haulers, commuter jets, even a lone private Cessna that had somehow strayed into the madness, all of them clawed their way down under James' unwavering voice. By the time the final aircraft rolled safely to a stop, the first gray hints of dawn were breaking over the horizon. The storm clouds thinned, shredded by the rising sun. What had been a sky of terror slowly gave way to light. Inside the tower, silence fell. The radios went quiet. The scope cleared. The red warnings dimmed, one by one. James removed his headset. His hands trembled as he set it down. For hours, his body had run on nothing but adrenaline, but now, with the danger past, fatigue hit like a tidal wave. His muscles ached, his head pounded, and his throat was raw from shouting commands. He stood and stepped back from the console, staring out the tower's glass windows. The runways stretched below, slick with rain, dotted with flashing emergency vehicles and weary aircraft. Beyond them, the city blinked to life, oblivious to the night's near disaster. He thought of the voices he'd heard, some calm, some broken, some almost screaming. He thought of the passengers who had sat in darkness, clutching strangers' hands, unaware that their lives balanced on every word from a tired controller. And he thought of the ones who hadn't called again, the blips that never made it home. Not tonight, but on other nights, in other storms. Those memories always lingered. His chest tightened. The tower was empty now, his shift long over, but he remained frozen at the window. The adrenaline had masked it before, but the weight of the night pressed hard against his ribs. What if I'd misjudged the separation? What if United 365 had lost the gear for good? What if? The questions had no answers, only echoes that rattled in his skull. Every controller knew this torment. Out there, perfection was demanded, because even the smallest slip could tear hundreds of lives from the sky. James lowered himself into a chair, covering his face with both hands. For a moment, the seasoned professional, the calm voice of authority, was gone. He was just a man, tired, scared, fragile. But he also knew this: every passenger stepping off a plane that morning owed their life to the work inside this tower. They would never know his name, would never see his face, but they were alive because he had held the line when the sky turned hostile. Slowly, James straightened. He wiped his eyes, drew a deep breath, and let the storm inside him settle. There would be another night, another storm, another impossible test. And when it came, he would be here again, headset on, voice steady, carrying strangers he would never meet through the darkness. Because that was the duty. That was the burden. That was the life of an air traffic controller. As the sun climbed higher, painting the soaked runways gold, James left the tower at last. To the world outside, it was just another morning. But to him, it marked the end of a night he would never forget. One more nightmare survived in a career built on them.